My name is Elsa Timothy. I am 34 years old, and I work as a senior structural engineer. My job is simple on paper. I calculate exactly how much weight a structure can take before it suffers catastrophic failure. Last summer, at my parents' 40th anniversary party, my mother stood in the middle of a living room I had been quietly paying for since I was 26, and announced to a crowd of 30 relatives that my younger brother had done more for this family than I ever could. She said it while resting her hand on a custom granite countertop I purchased with my own savings. She had no idea whose name was registered on the county deed of the house she was standing in. She had no idea what specific document I had signed at precisely 9 a.m. that Tuesday morning. And she certainly had no clue that my response would dismantle 40 years of family tradition in less than 4 minutes. Welcome back to Revenge Petal, the home for stories where quiet people finally speak the unspoken truths that families spend decades hiding. Before we dive into this wild story, hit that subscribe button right now to see how this drama unfolds. And type in the comments which country you're watching from. I would absolutely love to say hello and see just how far our story is traveling today. None of this makes sense without first understanding how structural load works in real life. I inspect bridges and corporate towers. It is quiet, behind-the-scenes work. Nobody applauds a bridge for simply standing there day after day. People only pay attention when it begins to collapse. In my family, my mother, Evelyn, ran our house on Oak Ridge Lane like a Broadway director. My father, Marcus, kept his head down and tried to avoid conflict. And my 21-year-old brother, Julian, lived in the basement, moving effortlessly from one failed business scheme to the next while everyone cheered him on. The refrigerator in our kitchen was my mother's personal newspaper. Anything she felt proud of got pinned under a magnet. For 4 straight years, the main headline was a local newspaper clipping of Julian standing next to a folding table at a weekend community fair. He had carried 2 tables for an afternoon, got his picture taken, and became a legend in my mother's eyes. When I earned my senior engineering license after years of 90-hour work weeks, I mentioned it during Sunday dinner. My mother glanced up, said, "That's nice, dear," and immediately turned to ask Julian about his latest idea for an online boutique. My official promotion letter never made it to the fridge. I told myself back then that it didn't matter. I was 26 when I discovered exactly how much my standing in that house cost per month, and I ended up paying that invoice for 8 years straight. It all began 8 years ago when my father suffered a severe spinal injury at his factory job. Surgery followed surgery, and within 6 months, their savings were completely gone. I discovered how dire things were when I dropped by on a Tuesday afternoon and spotted a bright yellow paper on the kitchen table before my mother could hide it under a placemat. It was a formal foreclosure notice from the county. They were 4 months behind, and the bank was done issuing warnings. My mother cried her public tears, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, while my father stared blankly into his coffee mug. Julian squeezed my mother's shoulder, whispered, "We'll figure it out, Mom," and promptly went downstairs to play video games. I sat down with the notice and did what I do best. I calculated the load. Their income was gone, and no financial institution was going to refinance a retired disabled factory worker. There was only one way to keep a roof over my parents' heads. I drove back to my small apartment, opened my savings account meant for my future home, and stared at the screen until 2 a.m. Saving that house meant emptying my entire future. But here's what most people fail to understand. I didn't just pay off my parents' debts. I bought the house outright. A real estate attorney drafted the papers cleanly. I purchased the house on Oak Ridge Lane for $180,000, its full appraised value. I put down $20,000 of my hard-earned money and took out a 15-year mortgage in my name alone. At closing, the title company recorded the deed under one name, Elsa Timothy, sole owner. My parents walked away with 0 debt and $30,000 in cash equity. They remained in the home rent-free, with no lease. My father hugged me tightly in the parking lot, unable to speak. My mother smoothed her jacket and whispered that we didn't need to discuss the financial details with the rest of the family. I thought she was simply embarrassed by the foreclosure. I realized far too late what she was actually doing. She was erasing me from my own sacrifice. By the following Sunday, She told her church friends they had successfully refinanced. By Christmas, the narrative was that the family had faced a rough patch and overcome it together. For 8 straight years, $2,000 left my account every month for the mortgage, along with thousands more for property taxes, homeowners insurance, and repairs. Whenever the roof leaked or the furnace broke, I wrote the check. Meanwhile, Julian would show up with a $20 box of donuts, and my mother would take a photo, post it to the family group chat, and praise him for always taking care of the family. If you have ever been the invisible pillar keeping your family afloat while someone else got all the praise, drop a comment below and let me know how you handled it. The only person in that house who truly saw what was happening was my grandmother, Clara. She lived in the small back bedroom on the ground floor. Officially, she was there so my mother could care for her, but in reality, Clara was the one keeping me grounded. Every few months, a crisp envelope would quietly land in my purse, containing $20 or $40 from her pension check, accompanied by a handwritten note. For the property taxes, do not argue. It wasn't about the cash. It was the fact that someone inside those 4 walls was keeping an honest ledger of my sacrifice. One warm July evening, my mother was leaning out the kitchen window, boasting on the phone to an aunt about Julian's newest business venture, a custom t-shirt printing idea that had already swallowed $2,000 of my father's remaining savings. Clara sat beside me on the back porch steps, watching the sun dip below the fence where her pink hydrangeas were in full bloom. She patted my knee gently, looked at me with sharp, knowing eyes, and said, "Elsa, being needed is not the same thing as being loved. Don't take as many years as I did to learn the difference." I tried to laugh it off, but she held my gaze like an inspector evaluating a fractured beam. When Clara passed away 2 years later, Julian delivered a dramatic, tear-filled eulogy at the funeral that had half the congregation weeping in their pews. My mother sat in the front row receiving condolences as if she were accepting an award for a lifelong achievement. Nobody in that church asked who paid the $4,000 bill to the funeral director. I paid it quietly, just as I had paid for everything else over the past decade. Afterward, at the reception, my Aunt Deb squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "Isn't Julian remarkable? Clara would have been so proud of the man he's become." I stood there doing internal math I had avoided for years. I was 32 years old, living in a rented 1-bedroom apartment with no equity of my own, while every dollar I had ever saved was buried inside a structure where my contribution was treated like a phantom rumor. I made a decision that night. I was going to pay off the remaining mortgage balance early. Once the final lien release was recorded, I planned to present the clear title at a family gathering, not to brag or cause a scene, but simply to hear one clear sentence out loud. "Elsa saved this home." It sounds ridiculously small when said aloud, but to anyone who has spent their entire life being rendered invisible by the people they love, you know that recognition means everything. I threw every extra bonus and consulting check at the principal balance, determined to cross the finish line before my parents' upcoming 40th anniversary party. Have you ever sacrificed your own financial future just to secure a family member who wouldn't do the same for you? Tell me your experience in the comments. I read every single one. In early May, I finally made the absolute last payment on the house on Oak Ridge Lane. 8 years of putting away $2,000 every single month finished 7 full years faster than the original mortgage agreement required. The official county document arrived in my apartment mailbox 3 weeks later. Lien release recorded. Elsa Timothy, sole owner. I sat down on my living room floor, tracing the raised seal of the county recorder with my thumb, and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since I was 26. It was done. An entire property bought, paid for, and secured, completely free and clear. While my phone sat on the coffee table buzzing with group chat notifications about Julian's latest online venture, I stared at that single sheet of paper. My mother had typed a massive wall of text in the chat praising Julian's visionary mindset, complete with red hearts and exclamation points. Not a single person in that chat knew that 4 miles away, their daughter had just finished single-handedly carrying an entire real estate asset across an 8-year span. But I told myself that June was coming the 40th anniversary party. The whole extended family would be in one room, and I would hand my parents the lien release in a quiet, beautiful moment. I rehearsed how I would present it. I rehearsed the embrace afterward. I never got to use a single line of that rehearsal. 2 weeks before the anniversary party, I dropped by Oak Ridge Lane to check on a dripping sink in the upstairs bathroom. My parents were out at a parish meeting, so I used my spare key and brought my toolbox inside. While searching the study for plumber's tape, I opened the roll-top desk where my father kept extra office supplies. Right there in the front divider sat a thick manila folder labeled in my mother's unmistakable handwriting, Family Legacy Plan. I opened it. The top document was a letter from a high-end estate planning law firm. Underneath it was a drafted document titled, Quitclaim Deed, Elsa Timothy Grantor, to Marcus and Evelyn Timothy Grantees. My mother had hired a lawyer using money she claimed not to have, instructing them to draft a legal transfer to force the house out of my hands. Beneath that draft were updated wills leaving the property on Oak Ridge Lane exclusively to Julian upon their passing. My name didn't appear on a single page, except on the line where I was expected to sign my ownership rights away. Attached to the corner was a yellow sticky note in my mother's handwriting. Anniversary toast. She won't say no in front of everyone. If you discovered your own family was plotting behind your back to take away what you worked for, how would you react? Let me know in the comments below. I stood motionless in the quiet den, listening to the steady tick of the wall clock, feeling my blood turn to ice. The legal letter outlined 2 deliberate steps. Step 1 was to ambush me at the anniversary party, presenting the quitclaim deed under the guise of securing the family legacy, complete with a hired notary public already scheduled to attend. Step 2 was mapped out if I refused. The attorney noted that the family could threaten legal action, claiming I had purchased the home as a constructive trust for my parents' benefit. The lawyer openly noted it was a weak argument, but pointed out that the shame and financial burden of litigation almost always forced cooperative signatures from family members. They had spent $1,500 on a legal retainer to trap their own daughter. People who claimed they couldn't afford a $400 plumbing repair found $1,500 to hire a lawyer against me. I pulled out my phone, photographed every single page, squared the folder back into its exact slot, and wiped my fingerprints off the desk. The very next morning, I took a personal day from work and sat in the office of Alan Boyd, a veteran real estate attorney. He reviewed my original purchase agreement, the settlement statement, the recorded deed, the lien release, and the photos of my mother's plan. His verdict was absolute. The property was 100% mine, purchased at fair market value, and no court in the state would overturn it. My parents were legally tenants at will. However, Alan warned me that if my parents filed a frivolous lawsuit before I sold the house, they could attach a legal notice to the title, freezing the asset in court for over a year. He pointed to the retainer signature on the letter, my mother's looping cursive, and right beneath it, my father's small, hesitant signature. He had signed it too. Alan looked at me over his glasses and said, "Whatever move you're going to make, Elsa, make it before they file anything." That Sunday, 2 weeks before the party, I sat at their dinner table for one final test. I looked at my mother and asked casually, "Mom, what would happen if I ever decided to sell this house?" My mother let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "You wouldn't dare," she said smoothly. "It isn't yours, Elsa." "Not really. A daughter doesn't own her family's home. She holds it for the family." She was telling me, without a trace of guilt, that I was never an owner, just an unpaid caretaker holding an asset for her son. I looked at my dad, but he was staring intensely at his plate. I smiled, passed the green beans, and finished my meal. The second I stepped out to my car, I called a commercial realtor friend. "Renee," I said, "I need to sell a residential property completely off-market to a cash buyer. How fast can we close? If you were in my shoes, would you have confronted them right then? Or would you have made a quiet move behind the scenes, like I did? Tell me in the comments below." Renee moved with absolute precision. Within 48 hours, she connected me with a private investor named Tom, a cash buyer who specialized in rental properties and preferred fast, quiet acquisitions without open houses or public listings. The only challenge was arranging a walkthrough without alerting my parents. Fortunately, they handed me the perfect window themselves. That very weekend, my parents departed for their church's annual 2-day mountain retreat. On Saturday morning, I unlocked the front door of Oak Ridge Lane with my own key and walked Tom and Renee through the house. Giving a stranger a tour of your childhood home is a surreal experience. I pointed out the new furnace I had installed, the rewired fixtures, and the structural repairs I had overseen. Tom measured the rooms, snapped photographs, and made quiet notes on his clipboard. As we walked through the back bedroom, I saw Clara's pink hydrangeas swaying gently outside the window. A sudden wave of hesitation hit my chest. 34 years of memories, holiday dinners, and family history echoed through those hallways. Twice, I almost told Tom to stop. Twice, I felt the urge to pull out my keys, lock the door, and pretend none of this was happening. But then I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo of my mother's handwritten note. Anniversary toast. She won't say no in front of everyone. That photo was raw data. It was proof of a structural trap, and an engineer never ignores structural data. In the kitchen, standing beside the granite countertop I had paid for, Tom clicked his pen and offered $290,000 cash, as is, with a 3-week closing time frame. I looked at the contract, but before I signed, I attached 3 mandatory conditions to protect my parents, despite everything they had planned. First, I required a written lease agreement granting the current occupants 60 days of rent-free living post-closing. Second, I booked and prepaid a professional moving service for a date within that 60-day window. Third, I paid the security deposit and first month's rent on a modern, single-story 2-bedroom apartment 10 minutes away from Julian, ensuring my father wouldn't have to navigate stairs with his injured back. My friend Jess asked me later why I was spending thousands of dollars to cushion their fall after they had plotted to betray me. I looked her in the eyes and said, "I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it so that for the rest of my life, I never have to question who I was when it mattered." They wanted to strip me of my asset in secret under the guise of family. I was going to hand them a soft landing in full daylight. Would you have provided your family with an apartment and paid moving services after discovering a betrayal like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The official closing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on the Tuesday before the anniversary party. I took another personal day from work and sat in the title office, surrounded by the smell of fresh paper and coffee. The escrow officer pushed a stack of legal documents across the polished wooden table. "Sign here, initial here," she said repeatedly. I signed my name until the letters lost all meaning, until the stroke of my pen officially severed my ownership of Oak Ridge Lane. At 9:38 a.m., Renee's phone chimed with confirmation of the incoming wire transfer. $290,000 was deposited into my account, minus capital gains taxes and fees. The deed was recorded under the buyer's name. It was done quietly, legally, and without a single member of my family present. It didn't feel like a triumphant victory. It felt like signing a death certificate for a relationship that had been dying for 8 long years. On Friday night, I sat at my kitchen table and prepared for the anniversary party, as if prepping a structural report. I created 3 crisp white envelopes, labeled neatly in my drafting block print. Envelope 1 contained the formal 60-day notice to vacate, fully compliant with state law, attached to the buyer's signed agreement permitting my parents to stay rent-free for 60 days. Envelope 2 contained the paid deposit receipt for the Huber Heights ground floor apartment, the floor plan, and the prepaid mover's confirmation, all transferable to my father with a single phone call. Envelope 3 held a plain printout of the official county recorder's title history for the property over the last 8 years, ending with the recorded deed transfer from Tuesday morning. Saturday arrived, 4 o'clock at Oak Ridge Lane. My mother had transformed the home into a stage set. White streamers on the mantel, grocery store, floral arrangements everywhere, and 30 relatives mingling through the living room. Sandra, the parish council notary, was already seated near the back, her heavy leather seal bag resting under her chair. Julian was working the room in a dark blazer, playing the dutiful son, landing jokes, and topping off drinks. My father stood by the window, staring into his glass, avoiding my eyes because deep down, he knew what was scheduled for the afternoon. And sitting right under the gift table, behind a decorative tissue bag, was the corner of the manila folder labeled Family Legacy Plan. The trap was completely set, every piece in position, waiting for me to step onto the load plate. What would you do if you walked into a room full of relatives knowing a trap was set for you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Then came the exact sound I had been anticipating ever since I found the sticky note in my father's desk. My mother, beaming with pride, tapped her silver spoon against her glass. Everyone, she called out, silencing the room. Before we slice the cake, Marcus and I have something very special to share with our family. She gave a brief, emotional speech about 40 years of marriage, wiping away a tear and stressing how family was the only true legacy that mattered. The room broke into warm applause. Aunt Deb dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Then, my mother turned directly toward me, her smile widening under the dining room lights. "Elsa, sweetheart, come step up here for a moment." 30 pairs of eyes turned to face me. I walked forward smoothly, shoulder bag in hand, stepping right onto the trap. She reached under the gift table with a dramatic flourish and pulled out the manila folder. "As Marcus and I grow older," she announced to the crowd, "we want to ensure this home stays in the family legacy forever, right where it belongs. It's all drawn up, just a quick formality." She opened the folder, flipped to the flagged page, and held out a heavy burgundy pen. Sandra the notary was already unzipping her leather bag. "Right here on the grantor line, sweetheart," my mother whispered, her eyes hardening beneath her warm expression. "For the family." I took the folder. I read the quitclaim document slowly and deliberately in front of everyone, letting the room's chatter die down into complete silence. Then I looked up at my mother and asked in a clear, level voice, "Mom, do you want to explain to everyone what this document actually is? Or should I?" Her smile stiffened slightly. "It's just legal paperwork to protect our home, Elsa. Sign it so we can cut the cake." I clicked the burgundy pen once, laid it flat on the table, and closed the manila folder. "I won't be signing this, Mom," I said smoothly, "because it isn't mine to give away anymore." A collective murmur rippled across the room. My mother's face paled. "Don't be dramatic, Elsa." I kept my voice calm, adopting the tone of a professional structural inspector delivering a final verdict. 8 years ago, this house was 30 days away from county foreclosure. I bought it. My name has been on the deed since I was 26 years old. I paid every mortgage installment, every property tax, every insurance bill, the new roof, and the furnace. You lived here completely rent-free. And as of Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, I sold the property. It now belongs to an investor named Tom. Gasps erupted around the table. Aunt Deb dropped her plate. My mother looked as if the ground beneath her had collapsed. I opened my bag, pulled out the 3 white envelopes, and laid them neatly on the tablecloth right beside the untouched anniversary cake. 60 days legal notice to vacate, rent-free. A deposit paid on a 2-bedroom ground-floor apartment near Julian, and a copy of the county deed records in case anyone wants to verify the facts. My mother completely exploded, her glass crashing onto the lace cloth as her composure shattered into pieces. She screamed the exact same phrase she had hurled at me months ago. "After everything we've done, your brother has done more for this family than you ever could." I simply nodded, feeling a deep, unshakable peace take over. "You're right, Mom. You've said that for years, and I'm done arguing. He's got 60 days. Let's see what he can do." The screen door slammed shut behind me, but before I could reach my car, my father stepped onto the porch. He stood with his hands jammed deep into his pockets, unable to meet my eyes. "I told your mother this was going to push you away, Elsa," he muttered softly. It was his first real confession. He had known about the plan since March. He had known when his small, cramped signature went onto the retainer letter beside hers. He had measured the structural risk of losing his daughter, and he signed anyway. Silence is a signature too. "You have 60 days, Dad," I said quietly, getting into my car and leaving Oak Ridge Lane behind forever. The fallout over the next 2 months unfolded exactly as expected. Julian immediately set up an online fundraiser titled "Help Save Our Aging Parents' Home," featuring a photo of my mother on the porch alongside a lengthy paragraph claiming a heartless daughter had sold their house out from under them. It raised $400 before a neighbor posted a direct link to the public county recorder website in the comment section. When people saw the actual deed history, my initial purchase 8 years ago, the mortgage payoff, and the lawful sale, the fundraiser, went silent and vanished overnight. My prepaid movers arrived on schedule in week 7. My parents moved into the single-story apartment in Huber Heights. Julian stood in the driveway on moving day, loudly promising the extended family that he was stepping up to take care of everything now. His golden era lasted precisely 6 weeks. Once doing more required paying actual bills, Julian moved into their spare bedroom, began borrowing money from my mother's grocery envelope to cover his own expenses, and by week 6, he packed his bags and moved in with his girlfriend across town, promising to visit on Sundays. For the first time in decades, my parents are carrying the actual financial weight of their actual lives, and the reality is teaching them what I never could. As for me, after paying capital gains taxes and closing fees, the remaining proceeds allowed me to purchase a cozy red brick 2-bedroom house built in 1952. Good bones, solid foundation. I checked it professionally. It is the first property I have ever signed my name to that was truly for me. On my very first evening in the new house, before moving a single piece of furniture inside, I carried a paint bucket with a root cutting of Clara's pink hydrangeas into the backyard and planted it along the fence. It bloomed beautifully this past spring, one massive pink bloom facing the back porch. Last month, my 19-year-old cousin Maya came over to help me cook dinner. While drying dishes at the sink, she looked at me and asked the question she'd been holding in for months. "How did you finally do it, Elsa? How did you say no to your own mom?" I handed her a dish towel and told her the truth. I learned it late, but my grandmother taught me that being needed is not the same thing as being loved. The day I stopped confusing the two, I lost a house I had paid for, but I finally found the walls that hold me. If you are the person quietly carrying your family while being treated as invisible, protect what is yours, because paper doesn't lie, even when people do. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Petal for more stories.